of the year, December 30th. And today I picked two matching pair of a song and a poem that are on the lighter side because we talk about anti-war all the time and there's some other serious subjects, but this one is a light one. I don't know what happened. I'm having some. Okay, let's hope everything's fine. So I picked this Tonight is a song from West Side Story, and I matched it with a light-hearted romantic poem written by Li Yu. Li Yu is the last king of a dynasty, and he wrote many wonderful, wonderful poems, but he was not noted for his lightheartedness because he was the last king or emperor of the dynasty. He suffered a great deal at the end of his life. But this is before that all that happened. And I'm going to talk about World War II, or the Second World War, and the plague. Since we're in the middle of this plague, we were going to talk about bubonic plague, the Old Testament, and the West Side Story, because this musical, excuse me, this musical is a phenomenal. It's a landmark. It's a beautiful piece of work that really shook the world. For once, I did not have a misspelled word to correct. Maybe I didn't find one, but this entire slide has nothing highlighted in red. And it has been a while that I just go through the list. I don't have to go back to the list. Everything will be arranged according to this list for the rest of the class. So we start with number one, which I do not have very much to say. It is innate versus learned or learned. The word learned is pronounced as learned. However, sometimes it's called learned when we use this to describe a person who is who has a lot of knowledge or wisdom, or who is a very respected person. We would call him a learned person instead of learned person, because learned is the past tense of the verb learn. So this word has two different pronunciations when used differently. And when we say innate versus learned, we're talking about nature versus nurture, 就是中文叫做先天versus 后天. Let me see if I can find it. I know I tried this before. I should have tried this before the class started, but I cannot put the cough drop in my mouth while I talk. So I'll just look at it a little from time to time. Okay. Our next slide is longitude versus latitude. On the globe, you can see lines from top to the bottom. Those are longitude. And those that are parallel and horizontal, those are called the latitude. 就是经度跟纬度. And a less formal name would be meridian for those up and down lines, meridian. And the east-west circles, they are called the parallel. And right in the middle of the globe is the equator, which is 赤道. That's the hottest place on Earth, because the sun is shining either straight at it or somewhere very close to it. So it's very hot. And this is equator on the map of a world map. So you can see that it passes through the northern part of Southern America and the middle part of Africa. The countries on the equator include, of course, Ecuador, which means the country on the equator. That is right here. Okay, it's a small country here, and it crosses the equator, crosses the capital, Quito of Ecuador, and it passes the southern part of Colombia. Most of the Colombia was north of the equator, but a little bit is south of it. And it passes Brazil in probably the longest stretch of any country. That's where the equator is in Brazil. Then I have this, I have to, okay. Then there's a little dot somewhere here in this ocean. It's a country that is so tiny, we've never heard of it, and I listed the name here. But that is a country in the ocean, in the Atlantic Ocean, that the equator passes it. Then we go to Africa. We have Gabon, Congo. Congo is a large country. Uganda is this one, and Kenya. Kenya's capital is Nairobi, and it lies right on the equator. And this horn is Somalia. This is Somalia. It looks like a boomerang. And it jumped all the way to Asia. As big as Asia is, there's only one country lying straight on the equator, and that is Indonesia. It landed on many, many parts of all these islands, but they are all Indonesia. Okay. So I got this map. Remember, there was once I asked that when I search for old Chinese poems on Google, I have to go through all these simplified characters in order to search for a traditional font of the Chinese character. And Lucy told me that I could set my Google setting so that my preference would be traditional font. And ever since that, all my Google search came up with all these Chinese characters instead of English. And I don't know, I guess I had to change back, but I'm too lazy to do that. So this is a Google map that has all the Chinese characters on it. And you can see that the equator is here. Somewhere. Okay, it crosses this line, okay. I guess it'll be a little south of it, right here, yeah. And here is a map of the entire Earth that you can see the red countries or territories are where the equator landed on, while the blue countries or territories are where the other one, the prime meridian is here. It was set at Greenwich, I don't know how to pronounce it, Greenwich, not a village, okay, Greenwich Observatory in England, 就是英国的格林威治这个气象台在这个地方。So they thought they were the center of the earth, so they decided to set prime meridian, which means longitude 0 degrees. is this line you can see on this map. So some other countries that this line touches would include France and Spain and Algeria and well, I have all these countries. Okay. It's on this one. Okay. We have UK, France, Spain, Algeria, Mali, Burkina Faso, Togo, and Ghana, and Antarctica. Okay, I need to proofread this part. So you have this, all these countries all the way down until it reaches Antarctica, which is a very big. Of course, it's not as big as this map shows because it's actually, the Earth is actually much smaller on top and at the bottom. Here I have a picture I took of a Greenwich Observatory. Royal Observatory, Greenwich, on May 1st. That was a May Day, a beautiful May Day in 2013. And right there, to the right of the picture, is the prime meridian. So people want to go there and have a picture taken showing that they indeed was there once. So you have all these things. It's like a monument that marks the prime meridian, and there's a line on the ground. You can see here. Okay. England having this thing on their land shows that once they were the mightiest country in the world, but they're no longer that way anymore. Trunk. When we talk about trunk, we say that the body is the trunk of the body is the center part. You can also use the word torso. That means this core part of your body. So everything else is an appendage. So you have 5 appendages attached to the trunk of your body, and they're the head, which is connected by the neck, and the 2 arms and the 2 legs. That's the 4 limbs plus the head. These are the appendages of the body. And another similar word with a little bit change at the end is appendix. When you have a book, there could be maps or pictures attached to this book, and index, and there is often an appendix at the end of the book, which means this is the part attached to the book at the end, but it's not a part of the main text of the book. So that's called the 附录. And when it comes to a human body, or there are other animals also, they would have a part of the intestine here in this picture. This little part is called appendix. It's because you have a long, long way, I don't know how long, hundreds of feet of small intestines and the large intestines, 小肠跟大肠, from the stomach to the small intestines, and then going into large intestines, and right in between them there is this little piece that goes nowhere, and with a very little function that we could think of. It's called the appendix, 盲肠, according to doctors, it has its own function, just it's not very apparent because food doesn't go in there. Food comes here and goes there, and that's it. But this is the appendix. Sometimes it gets infected and you need to have surgery to have it cut off. And you probably would not feel anything afterwards because your body still functions the way it used to, but you're now short of one part of your original equipment. Okay, let's go to the next one, huh? It is Allies versus Axis in World War II. Huh? During the Second World War, there were many countries participating in this war, and one side is called the Allies, and the other side is called the Axis. And the Allies, there are four big countries. The big four: United States, they declared war against the other side in 1941. And the Soviet Union, also 41. These two are the stragglers. They were not the original ones. And United Kingdom declared war on the Nazi Germany 2 days after Germany invaded Poland. So United Kingdom and France, they were both the earliest participant in this war in Europe. However, China and Japan were at it for years. They started in 1937. So that's 4 years and 2 months before the European war broke out. And France is not considered one of the big four because immediately it was entirely overwhelmed by Germany. Yeah, as soon as German attacked Poland, it took them very little time. In less than 2 years, the entire Europe, most of Europe was occupied by Germany. So we do not consider France as one of the big four. And on the other side, they have a tripartite pact. So these three countries had a pact. So they had some kind of treaty or agreement that bound them together. They are Germany, Italy, and Japan. So in the beginning, there were Japan and China fighting in Asia. Then several years later, Germany and Italy, they combined forces in Europe, and they were fighting like crazy in Europe. And a little bit later, the two sides uh, got contacted and combined forces. Both the Allies and the Axis became bigger by adding the Asian part, which was actually waging the wars before them. This is a little too complicated because there are so many countries involved in this war. That's why it's called the World War. There were 30 countries involved in this war. This is quickly Germany and Italy overwhelmed or conquered many of these countries. So pretty soon after the war was declared, we had all these governments in exile because they were conquered by other countries, so they no longer exist. The government has to run away, or the king or the president or whatever. They had to establish their government in exile. So many, you see, so many countries. There's Ethiopia, France, Poland, Yugoslavia, Greece, the Netherlands, Belgium, Norway, Czechoslovakia, and Luxembourg. All these are European countries except for Ethiopia. So they were all affected. Most of them were the European countries. They were affected by Germany, while Ethiopia was attacked by Italy. Uh, okay. Then these are all the other countries or territories that participated in the war. Many of them are, because UK was in the war, and all these colonies of the UK were involved in the war. There's India, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa. These are all colonies of UK, and the Philippines, that was a colony of United States, and Brazil, Mongolia, Mexico. And on the other side, we had also on the Allied side, but later in 43, 44, in the later years of the war, these countries who started on the Axis side at the beginning of the war, they jumped ship, or they were conquered, or they gave up, or they were recovered by the Allies. So these countries turned aside in the middle of the war. And on the other side, we had the Axis. Those are the three parties in the Axis pact. These are other countries involved on their side: Hungary, Romania, Slovakia, Bulgaria, Croatia. And all these, they probably, I don't know, co-belligerent. Belligerent means having bad feelings or being hostile. 就是有敌意的哈，他们these people are or used to be against the Allies, but like Soviet Union, they later changed side. And France was because they were occupied. So you have Free France on the Allied side and the Vichy France on the German side. These I don't know very much about them. Finland has always been on the Axis side. And for that, they paid a lot. And the reason they were on Germany's side is they were against Russia. Okay, so here's the next map that shows all the countries or territories, which means colonial territories, that are divided into two parts. The dark greens are allies, and the bright greens are they entered the Allies after Pearl Harbor. So it's got, you got United States and all these states, countries in America, North, Central, and South America. And on the other side, actually, you have a lot of sympathetic countries. It's because they were occupied by Japan. All these areas in Asia occupied by Japan, they were considered on the other side, which is the Axis side. And the gray ones are neutral. So you have Spain and Portugal and Morocco and Ireland and Norway and here Switzerland. These are neutral countries. So it's just a real world war with so many participants taking sides. This war is, from the European view, it started in 1939 and ended in 1945. It involved 100 million personnel, which means all those people who are in the executive branch, or they were in the army or navy or something, not the civilians alone. They number in 100 million and more than 30 countries. However, there are a lot of people who died who were not in the military, not military personnel. So civilians accounted a very large portion of the casualty, the fatality. Fatal 就是死掉了哈。Something is fatal. For example, you were in an accident. Somebody, okay, not you, of course. Somebody was in an accident, and the reporter would report how many fatality That means how many people died in this accident. And during this war, an estimated 70 to 85 million people died. And that includes a lot of civilian, even more than the military personnel. And they not only died because of bombing or military bombing or cannon or whatever. Not only in the military action, many more people died because of starvation and the killing of the civilians and the genocide, which means which would include the Jews and the many other people in the concentration camps. So this tremendous loss of people's life during the war was not directly connected to the military actions. And something that's notable is the nuclear bombs. Not only were people bombed in many cities, but there were 2 nuclear bombs dropped on Japan that killed a lot of people. This is a rough list of important dates. In China, Japan and China fought the war starting in 1937, or even you can count an earlier incident in Manchuria that's even earlier than 1937. When you say 1937, you're talking about July 7th. We call it 七七事变. And these are before the European War. Another thing before European War was Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. That is Germany and Russia, they secretly signed a friendship treaty just before Germany started the war. Germany was worried that if they start a war, then Russia would be involved. That makes things very complicated. They did not want Russia to be tugging their hind leg. So they reached an agreement secretly with Russia with this treaty, which is called Molotov-Ribbentrop. Molotov is a Russian official, while Ribbentrop, of course, is on the German side. So the 2 of them reached an agreement and signed a pact so that Germany decided now it's safe to start the war. And they started on September 1st, 1939. That's how they bombed and shelled Poland. They started from the border, and after a number of days, they reached Warsaw, and they bombed Warsaw. And if you're in Warsaw, every day around 11:30 something, they would have some kind of memorial chimes or bell ringing, something to mark that date. Okay, so they started the war on September the 1st, and on September 3rd, as I just mentioned, United Kingdom and France declared war against Germany. And Germany, it took Germany 2 years to carry out the Blitzkrieg, which is some kind of thunder and lightning warfare. The idea is that they would quickly defeat and occupy all their perceivable enemies in a very short time. So that's what they did, and they succeeded a lot, but they of course did not finish. And 2 years later, the tide of the war turned. So they started losing from that point on. And it also involved North Africa. When we say North of Africa, that's the part that is bordering on Mediterranean Sea, 就是地中海。Medi 就是 in the middle of. Terrain means the land. So Mediterranean Sea is the sea in the middle of the land, which in Chinese we would call 地中海. So Germany and UK waged a war on the northern shore of Africa. And in the beginning, Germany under Marshal Rommel, 我们叫做隆美尔将军, he was nicknamed the Desert Fox. He was very successful conquering the land from Morocco all the way eastward to, Tripoli and El Alamein and Egypt and so on, all the way until he was stopped eventually, probably in 1943 or something. However, on the east side, Germany, who had a Molotov-Ribbentrop pact with Russia, decided that they were sitting pretty. They conquered most of Europe, and now they want to have Russia under their belt. So on June 22nd, 1941, they opened up the Eastern Front, which is just by attacking Russia. Of course, they have to tear that treaty first. As soon as they tore that treaty, they started to invade Russia, and the Russia flipped side. Russia used to be Germany's German side. Now they were being attacked, so they become. They did not declare war so quickly. However, they eventually did, especially in Asia. They declare war against Japan right after the atomic bomb was dropped. That was very late. However, they had to counter the German forces, and as I mentioned before, St. Petersburg was under siege by Germany for over 900 days. So that's started soon after the Eastern Front was opened in June of 1941. And also happened in 1941 was Pearl Harbor, and everybody knows Pearl Harbor happened on that day, which is a day of infamy. That's my granddaughter's birthday. Okay, of course, that's much later. And we just say Pearl Harbor all the time, not knowing that Japan attacked dozens and dozens of places in Asia, all over Asia, mostly in the Pacific Ocean, in addition to Pearl Harbor. So they actually not just attacked the United States, they attacked many, many places. And soon after Pearl Harbor, Japan went southward. They occupied, say, the eastern coast of China, including Hong Kong, and they went to, Indochina, Indochina, OK， 我们叫做中南半岛，叫做印度支那半岛，because that part, Vietnam belonged to France at that time, so we call it Indochina. It is Indochina that was occupied by Japan and the Philippines and Singapore, and all the way down, threatening Australia, but not occupying Australia. They were in, for example, Batam, Borneo, that's Indonesia, yeah. Then the tide turned. Both Japan and Germany encountered difficulty conquering more land. They were losing. They gradually lost piece by piece, and Germany even attacked Italy. So that's when Italy, that was their ally, turned the tide. The northern Italy was occupied by Germany, but the southern Italy welcomed the Allied army to save them. Okay, and then there was D-Day, which is June 6, 1944, when Eisenhower launched the invasion on Normandy coast. That was one of the biggest things during the war, because from then on, Germany was losing all the way. And in a little less than 1 year, they surrendered on May 8th, 1945. And Hitler committed suicide probably a couple of days before that. And so that's the end of European warfare. That day, May 8th, was called the VE Day. That means Victory in Europe. So after that, the Allied had a meeting in Potsdam to decide how they are going to divide and conquer, or to dispose of all these people who lost the war. That was like 30 to 50, 30 miles west of Berlin. It's called the Potsdam. And in Asia, the war was not over until August, because even though Germany surrendered, Japan did not. They refused to surrender until America dropped 2 atomic bombs in August. In the early part of August, and Japan surrendered August 15th. That's called the VJ Day. That is a victory in Japan. Okay, so all this happened during the war, which is one of the greatest tragedy of human history. These happened after the war. We had the 4 nations, not China, but France, added to UK and US and Russia. These 4 countries, they occupied Germany, and they occupied Berlin. So you have the entire Germany, which was divided into 4 parts. Each country would occupy 1 part. And you have Berlin inside Eastern Germany that was cut into 4 pieces as well. And each winning country would occupy a piece of Berlin. And that all ended in 1989, but that was much, much later. That was after the Cold War ended. So we had the UN, which is United Nations, that was established because people think we cannot just go on waging war like this. We got to have some kind of a organization that can deal with issues between countries. So UN was founded. And then there was Cold War. That was, the world was divided into 2 parts, the Russian side and the US side. And the US side had, actually half of Germany was on this side, and France and the UK and many, many other countries were on this side, while Russia had many Eastern European countries, such as Hungary, Poland, the Baltic states, and all the way down to Yugoslavia and the Central Asia. Many, many, many countries in that part of the world also became part of the Russian, we wouldn't say empire, the communist Soviet Union. Okay, so that's what happened after the war. And because all these huge powers were so beaten up, even though they won, they were so distraught after the war that all the colonies wanted to leave. They wanted to become independent. So many, many, many countries in Africa and Asia became independent. Not all at once. Like India, they become independent in 1947. That was one of the very early ones. But most African countries, they became independent at different stages, and most of them were during 1964. As to those countries under Soviet Union, they became independent usually from 1991, some 92 or 93. So these are the things that happened. And also, of course, Germany became united in 1989, okay? And another thing that came out of the war is EU, a European community. They decided that they were the reason that war started. It's because Germany and France and many, like UK and the Netherlands and the Belgium, they were just too confrontational. They would rather become good neighbors. So they tried to work out some way to be friendly to each other. Without this world war, all these things probably would never have happened. So we have to go over this list because of the war. Okay, that's it. That's the end of it. Of course, there's a lot of things to be talked about when you talk about the war. This is just a few minutes of our class. The next one is we were talking about Alan Turing, the math genius who died probably by poisoning, chemical poisoning, either by suicide or by murder or by accident or whatever reason. He took cyanide, which we call 砒霜 or 氰化物. And this is very, very strong, lethal. We say lethal. Lethal 就是很毒性很重的 lethal. I'm sorry, I need to do this. I need to change my font. Okay. The word lethal means there is a Mel Gibson movie called The Lethal Weapon. It was so popular that he made it many times. There's Lethal Weapon 1, 2, 3, 4. I think there are at least 4. And Danny Grove was the black policeman who is his partner. So this is the word lethal, which means deadly. And poison is a more generic word, and it's not always lethal or deadly. Poison is just 有毒, but how deadly it can vary a great deal. I often mention that there's a castle in Ireland called Blarney Castle. Lots of tourists there go there to kiss the stone because it is said that you kiss the Blarney Stone, you will become so, you very convincing in your speech. You talk so greatly, you will get the gift of a fluent speaker. Okay, so in that castle, it's a nice castle. There are tons of castles in Ireland, but this one also has a beautiful park around it, and it has a garden right behind this castle. And this garden is called poisonous garden or something like that. It has all kinds of plants that are poisonous. You would think, ugh, terrible. How could anybody have a poisonous garden? And if you have been there, you will know that just about every garden in the world is a poisonous garden, because in this garden, which contains poisonous plants, they include, say, wisteria, 紫藤花, or hydrangea, 绣球花, or like rosemary and lavender and everything you can think of. That's like basil or oregano and thyme and sage. All the herbs that has medicinal benefits are considered poisonous plants. So, so it's just like any other garden, but it lists how poisonous it is. That shows you poison doesn't mean much. It definitely doesn't mean deadly or lethal. Okay, this is the words that I listed here because I was talking about sabotage, and the person who engaged in such an action of sabotage is a saboteur or saboteur or saboteur. There are many ways to pronounce it because it's not an English word. So after years, it's anglicized. Many English-speaking people would pronounce it as saboteur or saboteur or saboteur. And similarly with the entrepreneur and so on. However, this word amateur is so common that people just pronounce it as amateur instead of amateur or whatever. So right now it is standard that you pronounce it as amateur. Huh? And I added this last word, which was not listed in that first slide. It's provocateur or provocateur or provocateur. Okay, that is when somebody may not be your enemy, or the person may be very kind and happy when talking to you, but you want to challenge this person and you want him to become mad or excited. So you are provocating him to change his attitude. So you're 挑衅啊，这个字叫做挑衅者啊。I only know this word, and when I check this word about Google, this word, only this word comes up because in mainland they now use this word instead of this word. Okay. Now we have this word called vote. That is because of this Olympic game event called the pole vault. That is, you carry a long stick, which is a pole, and you run toward this pit of sand or sponge, and you stick it to the ground, and you just fly over this piece of pole that's erected there. If you can make it, then you succeeded at that height. Huh? That's called the pole vault. And vault originally is the word that I show right here as a roof that is high and closing in on the top, but wider at the bottom. So many big churches, like the picture on the left, it is a vaulted cathedral ceiling. Or the picture on the right is if you go to the basement of such a cathedral, you will see coffins of kings and queens kept in underneath the cathedral, and the basement would have vaulted ceiling as well. So the ceiling is closing in on the top and wider at the bottom. So these are the so-called vaulted ceiling. And on the left is the cathedral that most people can see, while on the right-hand side is the crypt. The crypt is the basement of a cathedral where they keep the coffins of famous people, which in Europe often means their local king or queen or prince. And because the bank has a place where it's guarded very heavily to keep all the money in the bank, or your money, your valuables. You may have famous paintings by notable painters, or you may have jewelry that's worth a lot of money. You don't want to keep them at your home. You would go to a bank and rent a safety box. That is a 保险柜, 保险箱, because most people don't have a safety box in their home. And many thieves who come to get your valuables, they could easily take that box away. So most people would go to the bank and rent a safe deposit box. And then they could put their valuables there. And the bank is supposed to have it very securely, that would not break down during flood or fire or earthquake. So this place, we use the word bank vault because it's almost as important as a cathedral, so holy and important, so they call it the vault. It does not necessarily have this kind of vaulted ceiling. Last time we were talking about who was pardoned by Trump. Right now there are like 20 or some people already pardoned, and these are more common names that we heard of: Michael Flynn, George Papadopoulos, and Charles Kushner, who is Jared Kushner's father, and Roger Stone. And they were all convicted and sentenced. They were not just accused of a crime, but they already gone through the court system and with the judge, and they were sentenced to certain things, but they were pardoned. And if they were serving some kind of sentence, then their sentence can be commuted. This word commuted. You are pardoned of a crime and you are commuted of a sentence, and your granted clemency is you are not going to be charged if you are granted a clemency. A clemency is the kindness of the powerful people. So we're not halfway there yet. He's going to pardon more people, I think. And on the list, there is also Susan B. Anthony, whose image was on the dollar coin. Have you seen a Susan B. Anthony coin? There are memorial coins like Kennedy, $50 or $1. Those were not a currency. Of course, they have their denomination on it, saying they are $50 or $1. But Susan B. Anthony coin is a real currency that you can use as money. And she is some kind of a feminist in the past. Maybe she was for, I don't know, for suffragette or something. Uh, uh, I am not familiar with her criminal record, but apparently she was convicted of some kind of crime for protesting or whatever, and Donald Trump pardoned her. He just wanted a few good people to be pardoned, so that people will not criticize him for pardoning so many real criminals. Okay. This is a verb, which is a very commonly used word. It's called the culminate. So you have culminating, something culminating in what? That is, it gradually goes up and up until it reaches the top. That is culminating. And if it's a verb, you can use the word climax. And the climax can also be used as a verb. And the next word is a delegate. Delegate, it can be a noun, which means a delegate of a country. The country could decide to send out a delegate to attend some certain meetings, but delegate is also a verb. So maybe the president can delegate this person to do something. On the other hand, you could be a CEO of a big company and you have so many things to attend to, you would delegate your work to several vice president of the company. Delegate means 把你的工作分给别人 as a verb. It is to divide your important work to some other people under you who would take care of that particular business for you. That's a word, delegate. So one important art to learn as a boss is how to delegate everything. There are people who just could not be a good boss because they were not willing to let go of the responsibility. So they would go into every offices and trying to control all the little things. If you cannot delegate, then you are not going to achieve very much in your main job, because most of the big jobs are too complicated for one person to get into all the greater details all the time. And this is a word called libretto. That is when you, that is lyrics, because we say English song has lyrics, 就是它的歌词, but when you have an opera or some songs that are not in English, then the lyrics can be called the libretto. I guess it's an Italian word or something. Many of the words in music are Italian words. For example, allegro. Allegro, I don't know. It doesn't sound it was spelled right. Or piano. Piano means light or low volume, or crescendo. Crescendo. I don't know. I can't spell them. Crescendo. Anyway, if you open your music sheet, there are words on it scattered about, and those words are, I know it's wrong, but I don't know. Allegro. Maybe allegro. Crescendo could be like this. Yeah, okay. But this is still wrong. Anyway, you get my point. So many words in music are in Italian language. So libretto is one of them. And this is very hard to translate into Chinese. I checked the dictionary. It says sophistication is a 复杂性. It is in a certain degree, but when we say a person is so sophisticated, we don't mean he's too complicated. We just know that he could tell the difference between some so many grades of things. He could see the nuance of things. Here's another word, nuance. So we say she is a sophisticated lady. I think there's a chain store called the Sophisticated Lady or something. And there certainly is a kind of fuchsia, fuchsia. Okay, I could never spell it. Fuchsia is a kind of flower. I have it right here, but it's too far for me to reach. It's like a ballet dancing girl, a little flower about this big, fuchsia, very pretty. And there is one kind of fuchsia that is called the Sophisticated Lady. Of course, there are hundreds of different kinds because it's such a beautiful flower, and the people try to create new versions of it all the time. So the word sophisticated is a very good word, but I don't know how to say that in Chinese. For example, we are all nice women, we get along well, and so on and so forth. But occasionally one or two of us would be so sophisticated that we all agree she is a great lady, so poised and elegant, and so on and so forth. We would use the word sophisticated to describe this person, and I'm certainly not one of them. And but we're talking about the look. I don't have that kind of look, but I want to get into the details of things. So you may say I have a sophisticated mind, but you could certainly not tell it from my appearance. Okay. Then I'll talk about sneezing, because we're talking about this plague thing, When people sneezes, I mean, one person sneezes, and you come from a foreign country to this country, and everybody was, they were saying things, you don't know what's going on. That's because many of them were saying bless you, or God bless you, or salute, or Gesundheit. All these words came from countries that went through the great bubonic plague. And the symptom in the beginning was to sneeze. So they developed this habit of blessing people's health when they saw somebody sneezes. In English, you would say bless you or God bless you. In Italian, you would say salute, which means to your health, good health, or things like that. Well, in German, you would say Gesundheit. And as I checked, there's a whole list on Wikipedia that include 107 countries on what people say in those countries when they see other people sneeze. The very interesting thing is Spanish. In Latin America, you would say, as any Italian would say, salud, which means the same thing. However, if you're in Spain, you don't say salute. You would say Jesus, which means Jesus, when the person sneezes for the first time. And if he sneezes for the second time, you would say Maria, that's the mother of Jesus. And if the people kept sneezing the third time, then you would say Jose, which means and Joseph. That's the whole family of Jesus. Jesus, his father, his mother is Maria, and Maria's husband is Joseph, and we don't know whether Joseph is Jesus' father or not. Maybe. Oh, okay. So we're going to talk about this pandemic. Epidemic is a word we learned earlier on. It just means some kind of disease that was passed very quickly, all of a sudden, from people to people. That's called the 流行病 or 瘟疫. And now we're in the middle of this huge epidemic, and the world is such a totally connected place that it soon passed on to people of all the countries in the world. So we add a pen in front of this word. So epidemic, instead of being epidemic, becomes pandemic. And if you are like me checking the word online, it will tell you how to remember this word because pandemic has a P. So you have a passport that takes you from a country to another country. So it'd be an epidemic with a passport is called a pandemic. That means it involves many, many countries. Huh? Pan, in Chinese, we would say fan, with a 三点水 on the side and the 贫乏的乏 on the other side. When I came to United States, I took a flight on Pan America. At that time, Pan America was the largest airline. It no longer exists. So when you say the word pandemic, Pan America, it means that it's in America, but then it's out of America. It goes to many other countries. So for example, we have I-5 here, right through the city of Seattle. If you drive I-5 all the way to the north, crossing the border to Canada, you would still drive on the same road, highway, interstate highway, and you could reach Vancouver. However, if you go the other direction, I-5 would go through Oregon and California. And when you pass into Mexico, it is called the Pan America Highway. And if you pass Mexico, you could go south and south and south all the way to Chile. It's still the same highway. It's called Pan American Highway. So this Pan means passport. Okay, it means it goes through many countries in America. Okay, so we have this one. Okay, and there are such diseases that are epidemic, but the greatest one was called the plague. So plague could mean this great one, and it could also mean any kind of pandemic. But in the history of Europe, there were waves of this plague that killed millions and millions and millions of people. That's why Chinese do not say anything when people sneeze, because plague did not really come to China. However, many, many countries in Europe and other continents were affected by the plague. So the plague is an epidemic of infectious disease, 就是一种流行病哈。That's a generic term. However, in particular, plague is mostly used about this one infectious disease caused by this bacteria. And it's in our Chinese, we would call the 鼠疫或者是黑死病哈。So when you say plague, you could mean a general infectious disease, just like epidemic, but more often it refers to this particular one, which is a form of, well, we could call it Yersinia pestis, 这种我们叫鼠疫的这种病。There are, generally speaking, three kinds of plague. There are bubonic plague, septicemic plague, and the pneumonic plague. So in Chinese, we would call it 淋巴腺鼠疫, 败血性鼠疫, and the 肺鼠疫. So here we have this prefix is about your lung. Pneumonia is 肺炎. Septicemic is a 败血. It's like gangrene, or it's like scully. I don't know exactly what it is, but these are the smaller kinds of plague. The overwhelmingly people who got plague had bubonic plague, huh? So that's called the 淋巴腺鼠疫. So we call it 鼠疫 or 黑死病, Black Death. It's also called the pestilence or the plague. It was the deadliest pandemic recorded in human history. It killed from 75 to 200 million people in Eurasia and North Africa. So that is a tremendous amount of people, often a third or even half of the population. It did wipe out a lot of businesses and countries, kings, and so on and so forth. And the greatest time it was passing through Europe was in 1347 to 1351, in the 14th century. Here's a map with different colors. If you look at the ribbon at the bottom of the map, you could see 1346, it started in green color, and it went yellow and orange, and eventually became brown color. So if you start from here, which is between Mediterranean Sea and the Caspian Sea, that's part of the Caucasus, the Caucasus. 高加索山脉, this part is Russia, and this is Armenia, Georgia, and Azerbaijan has this little finger sticking out like an appendage. So it started here, but it came this way and returned there. So you had all these main Western Europe which developed this disease later. Romeo was involved here in Italy during that time, and many other people, of course. And so it came, this part has no data, okay. So it probably came this way and went to Mediterranean Sea through this Sicily and okay, all these countries, and then landed on the mainland, and then went backwards, easternwards through there. So in about less than 10 years, actually, that's the greatest Black Death in history, okay? This, I'm not going to talk too much about it. It's beguile, which means charm or enchant or mesmerize. Mesmerize is more a magical thing. It came from the name of a magician whose name is Mesmer. So mesmerize means he sort of hypnotized the audience so that people could do strange things or see strange things. So all these words are not really about being attractive or something. It's almost a weird black magic, okay? So we do not use that word too much, actually. Then I talked about prohibition and the monopoly. In Taiwan, we had 烟酒公卖局, that is the monopoly by the government in manufacturing and selling of tobacco and liquor as a monopoly. So nobody can engage in such an activity. It's illegal to do that, which is different from the prohibition in the West. They say that consuming and drinking alcoholic drinks is against the law. So nobody can make it, nobody can sell it or ship it or whatever. So this is different from the monopoly we had in Taiwan. So in Taiwan, most people were not allowed to make wine just because it's a government monopoly, not because drinking is wrong. The word mono comes from one. Mono is one, single or alone, while poly means cell. And if you can allow a few people to engage a certain business, it's not a monopoly. It's probably a gallipoli or oligarchy. Oligarchy is the government, not with one president, but with several big heads, 2 or 3 or 4. That's an oligarchy, or a group of Politburo members. But anyway, I'm talking about the lack of economic competition. That is a monopoly. Once you have a monopoly, then this business can, actually we can translate this word as 垄断, huh? So 垄断 just being the only seller of something, huh? So you can set any price. You don't consider how much it costs for you to manufacture this good, because there's no competition. So you can jack up your price however you like, and the people who want it has to buy it. They have to buy it, okay? So this word can be turned into a verb that is monopolize. IZE is very frequently used to change a word, usually a verb into, I'm sorry, a noun into a verb. It's called monopolize. So it's very unfair. In the free market system, there should not be monopoly. And this is a board game. A board game is a game on a board, on a piece of hardboard, either square or rectangular. Usually a family would play a board game when they have free time. They put this board on the desk or table, and the members of a family would sit around the table and they would play this game, in this case, it's called Monopoly. This is the single most popular board game in United States. When I was in Taiwan, once we heard that, oh, this is an extremely popular game, so it was imported or exported. You see, a thing can be exported or imported depending on which side you're on, just like immigrant or emigrant. And the Monopoly game was imported from United States to Taiwan, and the people started to buy that. But somehow we were just not interested in this game. Actually, when I was little, I played it a few times, and we just forgot about it because we don't like it, okay? However, people in the United States, they just love this game very much. People like Trump would definitely spend a lot of time when he was a little guy to play this game and trying to become the winner of a board game, okay? And anatomy is to become self-governed. It does not really mean politically. So it could be morally, politically, and bioethically, bioethical philosophy, a philosophy in bioethics. So in all these different fields, you could develop a self-governing awareness. For example, government, of course, you could be a colony of a big power, or you could have a central government that controls all the things in the local government. However, there could also be some local autonomy with a localized government who would decide certain things. It is quite common in the world that a country would become autonomous, but not entirely. They would let another bigger power to do to take care of defense or foreign affair or military or whatever, but they would have a local government taking care of the local issues such as education or welfare or agriculture, as there are many aspects of a government, and the bigger countries used to control a lot of smaller countries underneath, but after World War II, most of those countries became independent or became autonomous. Independent is totally independent, and autonomous is partially independent. For example, I was in Tahiti, and they had this monument that says Autonomy 1984. That's the year when they partially became autonomous from France. So France is still controlling a lot of things and subsidizing a lot of things, but as to local governing, they are autonomous. It can also mean not just political, it can mean morally. If you are just obeying your emperor, you are not self-governing. If you think I am your own boss, I am my own boss, then you try to be autonomous instead of following the direction of someone higher up. So that would be morally autonomous. And the human resource, 我们说一个机关的人事部，this human resource can define each position, whether this person has the right to make certain kind of decision. That's a human resource issue. And in medical, the patient also has, nowadays, we think a patient has personal autonomy. In the old days, many people died not knowing that they got cancer because the doctor would not tell them. They probably told their family, but they would not tell them. Nowadays, we consider that just glaringly unfair, not knowing what you have. But even as high as the emperor of Japan, he died without knowing that he was dying of cancer, because it was their custom not to let him know that he had cancer. So medical autonomy is another thing that we can talk about. Then we talk about Leviticus and Psalm. When we talked about scapegoat, the story of scapegoat was in the Old Testament, in the book called Leviticus, 中文叫做利未记. And there are other books in the Old Testament, which is translated as 旧约圣经. 诗篇 is a psalm, is another book in Old Testament. First, we talk about Leviticus. It was part of Torah. It is the third book of the Torah. What do you mean by Torah? The first 5 books in the Old Testament together is called Torah in the Hebrew language. So Leviticus is the third one of the first 5 books. And it usually is from, most of it is from Exodus. Exodus, Genesis and Exodus. We have the first book, Genesis, which is 创世纪. Then the second book, it's called Exodus, 就是出埃及记. This Leviticus is mostly from Exodus. Exodus means going away from a place which is Egypt. So we translate into true ITG. It's because the Hebrew slaves, we talked about Hebrew slaves in the opera of Verdi, Va Pensiero. That's a chorus of Hebrew slaves. So in the Exodus, we had Moses, who led all these Hebrew slaves out of Egypt. This book is called Exodus, and Leviticus is part of the Exodus. And Psalm is the book that mostly consists of poems and songs written by mostly King David. King David 是他们的大卫王. King David wrote, he apparently is a prolific poet. He wrote many, many poems, and you can find many of them in Psalm. It's called Psalm, which is, of course, from a Hebrew word. The title is derived from the Greek translation, meaning instrumental music, and the words accompanying. Okay, it's probably a Greek word. Okay, so King David was revered by many to be one of the ancestors of Hebrew people, Israelis. And the Bible is called canon, 就是经书, In the West, it becomes mainly a word for religious canons. And in China, we use the word canon for 四书五经, 五经, we had 5 canons or 6 canons, and we all know what they are, but they are definitely not religious and definitely not the Bible. But we use the word canon to describe our 经书. And this Old Testament was written in Hebrew, 以色列人的文字叫做 Hebrew. And the New Testament in the beginning was written in Koine Greek language. Later on, we had a translation of the New Testament in just about every country. We even have a New Testament written in Taiwanese dialect and many, many other languages that had no written language, but they do have the Bible in their own language. But in the beginning, there was a Greek language, and there was also other languages. But since most Europeans at that time could not read any of the other languages, they all read Greek language. We call it Koine, which means the common Greek language. If it's French, there you would call Koine Franca, whatever. Okay, so the 2 testaments came in different languages, where Old Testament was written in Hebrew, and the New Testament in the original, the common version, was the Koine Greek language. How many books are there in the Old Testament? No, you cannot say how many, because they could be 39 or 50, not 50, 49 or 48 or somewhere in between, because there are different denomination of religions. They would issue or approve of certain Bible that only they agree with. So if you believe in a different Christians, for example, Catholic, Eastern Orthodox, Oriental Orthodox, or Protestant, then you would have an approved canon of text of Old Testament. They are all different in number and in languages. So you don't know how many there are. Okay, you do know, but there is not a one set number. As to the Old Testament, usually there are 4 parts. The first part is the Torah, which has 5 books. First 5 books of Pentateuch. Penta means 5, huh? 5 books there. It's called the Torah. So sometimes you could buy or you could get hold of Torah, which only has the first 5 books. 5 books. It's sometimes called the 摩西五书, just the 5 books of Moses. The second part is history. It tells about the history of Israelites. From their conquest of Canaan to their defeat by Babylon. So in the first 5 books, Moses got them out of Egypt. And the history part would tell how they found Canaan. Moses was in the desert in Sinai or Peninsula, or anyway, when he died, he did not take the people after 40 years to the land of Canaan. So I guess Joshua or Aaron or one of them finally landed in Canaan, which is a land of milk and honey. And they started to write their history. All this history were oral history. They did not write it down until they were captured by Nabucco, who is called Nebuchadnezzar. Nabucco is a king of Babylon, and the Jewish people were conquered by him, and he moved tens of thousands of them to Babylon. And this is a history. And while they were in captive, they started to write everything they knew, from history to poetry and to prophets, and even their cooking and living rules. They have strict rules. We would say kosher rules about how they would process their food and so what can be eaten and so on. So these 4 parts comprises of 4 parts. The Pentateuch, which is the first 5 books called the Torah, and the second part is history, and the third part is the poems or wisdom books. It has King David's Psalms and the Song of Solomon, all these literary works. And the fourth part is about the saints and the prophets in their religion. There are many, many saints. If you look at this, you can see the books of Old Testament, where the first 5 is called the Pentateuch. That's the Torah part. And then the second part is about history. So you have all these kings and general history. For example, Ruth and Ezra and Esther. These are people in their history. And of course, kings. Those are history. Then there's a poetic or wisdom books. There's a Psalm and the Song of Solomon. There's also a book of Job, which is quite famous because Job is the person who was tested by God to let him go through all kinds of suffering. And there's Proverbs. Okay. Then there are major prophets like Isaiah, Daniel, Ezekiel, Jeremiah. These are the huge, big time prophets, and all the rest of the minor prophets. So many of the versions would maybe skip some of the minor prophets. Then we come to spur, which means 马刺, 就是 when you ride on a horse, You would wear boots. You may wear boots with spurs at the heel, which is this part with the star-shaped thing that is called the spur. When you kick the horse with the spur, then the horse would feel pain in the tummy and start to run or do something or to listen to you more carefully. So these are called the spurs. And the word spur can also be used when you describe little branches on the fruit-bearing tree, such as an apple tree. On the right-hand side, you have one branch that after pruning, you got little spurs on it. These are called the spurs. And on the left-hand side is a picture of an apple tree. And many of the branches are very smooth and thin and straight. They are not fruit-bearing. And along came a gardener with a pair of pruners. He or she would cut off these tips at different places, like the one shown on the right-hand side. This person would cut here and here and here and here and here, so that shoots would come out that are short and fruit-bearing. So an apple tree, if you never prune it, it doesn't bear fruit well. But if you cut it from time to time, it will have more flowers, more blossoms, more fruits. And those short and spiky branches are called the spurs. Okay, while these straight and smooth branches are called the shoots or sprouts. Here's a simple word, crave, means 渴望, but it's often, it also often means you crave for something very, very much, but you're not craving for peace or tranquility or something. It's mostly about something, a very specific and little thing, such as a pickle, which is, sounds like it's not a normal kind of like. So you use the word crave, which means you're kind of weird to like this thing. So a pregnant woman would want to eat 酸梅 or pickle. That's the kind of craving you would have. And duo is, we had this two people, Lee Hazelwood and Nancy Sinatra. They became a duo, which is a singing group with two people. This two comes from a prefix that means two. So you can have two people who work together doing something, not singing, but that can also be called a duo. And a very common term we use is the dynamic duo, which means there's two people, they work together so well, so much better than individual two people, that they are a dynamic duo. Dynamic 是一种炸药 dynamite 是炸药 so they collaborate 就是两个或者不止一个人合作的意思 collaborate. We also can say cooperate, but there's a little difference in that collaborate is more on the equal ground, and each one contributes a lot to this combined effort, while cooperation is just some people working together. They do not necessarily have that synergy or that kind of high level of collaboration. That's the word cooperate. I can put it here. This is a word we know more, cooperate. I remember a time when we say cooperate, we would put a little hyphen here, and we would probably put some umlaut on top of one of the O's. That means two little dots. but no longer people start to simplify words. For example, we say agency, 爱琴海, we spell as Aegean, or we say Mediterranean. We say encyclopedia. That's one word we used to spell with an A and the E attached together. But as years go on, we dropped one of the letters. That's the word cooperate. We used to have a hyphen there, but now we don't do that anymore. We're so old that we passed that time. Okay. So the next one is defy. We don't have to say much about that. And this is a baluster. Here's the word baluster. If you try to find the word baluster, you will get this picture, which is a balustrade with many, many balusters. Each individual 栏杆的栏 is a baluster. But the whole thing is a 栏杆, so it's called a balustrade. And we usually use that in the occasion that we talk about a palace or a holy site or a Buddhist temple or something. So the word balustrade is not that common in daily life. In your home, you could have a fence outside, or you could have a staircase with railings. Those are simple words, but balustrade is fancy. It has to be fancy to be called a balustrade. So you have, like I do have when I go upstairs, I have a railing, which is just a simple piece of metal or a handrail. Okay. And this is probably the last word, genre, which I talked about some time ago. It is a classification or a style or a type of thing, but it's strictly used in artistic things. Well, for example, literature or poetry or painting or things like that. Different, for example, jazz is a kind of music, so you would call a genre, or country music, or in Chinese we would have a fu, shi, ci, qu. All these are different genre of literary work. So we're going to stop share now. I hope, and go to screen share. And I'm going, did I? I need to do it a little differently. I need to pump up the sound. Okay, I should not be so quick. Now we're back here. We're not back here. I'm sorry. New share. We are picking the wrong one. Okay. Here we have it. Okay. Okay. Uh, have you heard of this song?
Yes.
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 Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. It is a phenomenal thing here. Okay. Here I have with the lyrics. Okay. And I just, we just went through the lyrics and there's not much, no difficult word there. But he describes that the world was an address and now it's a star. In in Chinese, we easily understand what a star is, but in English, it takes you a while to understand whether you're talking about a planet or a star, because the star is like the sun, and there's only one star in our galaxy, 哈。所以我们很多人以为是 star 的东西，其实不是 star 哈，其实是 planet. A planet is not a star, okay? I'm not going to read this unless I see something that grabs me. With suns and moons all over the place. Okay, so we have this West Side Story. What we saw was the movie. Of course, most musicals started as a stage musical. So after 10 or 20 years, it'll become a movie. Nowadays, a few of them would be a movie first and then become a stage show. They each had their different straits that are suitable for different occasions. Let's not talk about that. This was inspired by William Shakespeare, the Romeo and Juliet. It's about New York City, however. It's not about Italy in the medieval times. It's in 1950, right after the war, and society is kind of not too stable, and there are juvenile cliques. They have groups of teenagers or young people in their young 20s. They became 不良少年, we say juvenile delinquent. And they would form different groups and fight. Sometimes there would be death. And in this story, in the end, the Romeo and Juliet did not die like in Shakespeare's play. The girl survived. They did not let her die. And these are two groups of young people, street gangs. Here's the gang, G-A-N-G, 就是一群人呢，多半是做坏事的人哈。Street gangs, like we say, the gang of four, and that means 四人帮哈. In China, after the Cultural Revolution, they found these four people as scapegoat, but they are probably guilty. But there are a lot of other people who were guilty during the Cultural Revolution for persecuting fine, ordinary human beings. They call it the Gang of Four, 就是四人帮. And there are two teenage street gangs. of different ethnic background. I'm reading from this line. Two teenage street gangs of different ethnic background. Ethnic meaning 不同的种族哈. A group of people from Puerto Rico, they form a group called the Sharks, while the other are white people, and this Tony is apparently Italian, so they call their gang Jets. So this story is not a happy-go-lucky story. Most musicals are called the musical comedies because they're just for fun. You sing and dance and have fun to have a musical. However, this one is very dark, with killing and dying at the end, and lots of confrontation. So it's a very, very different musical with very sophisticated music written by sophisticated musicians. By that I mean Leonard Bernstein. He is one of the greatest musicians in America. You can just say that with a straight face. There are thousands of musicians in America, but if you say Leonard Bernstein is the greatest, very few people would say no. Yeah, because he was so great. And with him writing the music, this music is not your run-of-the-mill musical. The music is very complicated and beautiful. And it has extended the dance scene, lots of dance. Some people say it has more dance than any other things that are great about it. You would be mesmerized by its dance sequences. And it deals with social problems. That is another important thing. You could say that some of the former musicals also dealt with social problems, but not as much as this one. Especially you had Rodgers and Hammerstein, who wrote The Sound of Music, which is about Nazi, and they wrote Oklahoma, which is about there's a kind of domestic violence in there. There is a suitor of the girl Laurie, who is a kind of violent. He actually set fire to the haystack. So that's a kind of a domestic violence issue. And even more so about domestic issue is the musical, how do you call that? The merry-go-round, Carousel, okay. Carousel is another musical that dealt with the domestic violence. But compared to West Side Story, this story is much more violent and dealt with more social issues than all the rest before it, with the dance and the music that are in a higher caliber to match. I would add the word caliber here. Caliber. It can be spelled as caliber. A lot of English words spelled with R-E became E-R in American English. Caliber, for example, when you have a gun, you can say that gun is a 22 caliber gun because it uses the bullets that is 22 caliber. That caliber means the size of the calibration. Calibration 就是把 caliber 变成一个字，比方说你的 for example, you're making a cake, you use a measuring cup and it has calibration on it. It says half a cup, a quarter cup, or an ounce, and so on this cup. So this cup with calibration on it. And as to things like this, I just mentioned this musical has great music and dance and social problems. So it is a work of higher caliber than your regular musical 哈，就是在度数上说它是很高的度数哈。And this message in this musical is violence breeds violence. So if you treat people violently, it will come to you. Huh? If you have to make peace and learn to share turf with others, that's a message of the story. As was the message in Romeo and Juliet in Shakespeare's work. So it talked about bigotry in cultural misunderstanding. So you have Puerto Ricans and the white street gangs. You should just get along. You don't have to fight each other. Huh? And there's also the undercurrent of rebellion. 这个青少年的反抗性在这个里面哈。Young people, especially young men, a teenager, they have this streak of a rebellious, they have this rebellious streak. For example, 杨子不教谁之过这个电影 it's rebel or to rebel without a cause 这个电影就是讲年轻人不守规矩 And in China, we sort of kept that undercover. The parents never told you that you are going through a rebellious stage. They just say, all the children should listen to their parents. That's a Confucian way, okay? Some people criticize this musical as glamorizing gangs, 就是说它里面说这些帮派年轻人的帮派glamorize 就是 put a spin on it make young people think joining a gang is so prestigious, so great, such a wonderful thing. In Taiwan, I would say we probably banned this movie because of its glamorizing gangs. Okay, and in this movie or a play with a large cast of people, there are not enough Puerto Rican actors or actresses in it. This is one of the things that people complain about it. However, in this, there is one song called America. This girl, Puerto Rican girl says, oh, in America, it's so free. We're free to do all these things and so on and so forth. So this really shows the triumph of the spirit over the obstacles often faced by immigrants. Just like the musical Hamilton, it says, immigrants get things done. So you watch this and you see Mike Pence going to see this show, Hamilton, and the people would boo him because he is against this immigrant spirit. Immigrants going through all this trouble, overcame all these obstacles because they want to be an American, because they want to be free. Okay, so one of the message was that immigrants wanted freedom being in this country. And here I have Leonard Bernstein. He died in 1990. So he lived to be 72, okay? He, for one thing, he was the first American conductor to head an American orchestra. In the past, America knew that they were inferior to European in music. So they always hire some big shots from Europe to be the conductor in America. And Leonard Bernstein was the first American native-born conductor of the New York Philharmonic. And he did a lot more than that. He wrote music, including this one, and He did a lot of things. For example, he did a TV series, Young Man's Introduction to Concert Music or something. Every week he would conduct a class with his philharmonic behind him, and he would talk about, for example, Beethoven or Bach or somebody, or Baroque or a certain genre of music. And he would say, here's an example. And the band behind him would just play this at the tip of his baton. Huh? Well, the thing that he's holding in his hand is called a baton. 指挥棒, huh? A baton. So if you go to YouTube to look for Leonard Bernstein's class for young people, you would come across this wonderfully organized classes. He would explain all these things, and he would say, pop, and the band, the orchestra would play this little piece from Lavelle or from Debussy or from whatever. It's just like a magician. Yeah, it's something to watch. And the lyrics were written by Stephen Sondheim, and he's still alive. He was a young man, and this was his first time that he wrote any lyrics for any musical. Of course, he ended up writing a lot more. He also wrote music for the musical. So some of his works have music and lyrics both written by him. However, the general thinking is that he's not that a great composer. His music is not so great. Okay, if you would watch some of them. I know one of them is Little Night Music, and the one is what's that? Into the Woods. He wrote a very dark version of fairy tale with Rapunzel and Snow White and Sleeping Beauty, many fairy tales combined into one, but it's not about happily ever after. It's about domestic divorces, like Snow White after she married the Prince Charming, their marriage would break up and so on and so forth. So Sondheim is a very dark person, and you could see from this lyrics of West Side Story that he has a very dark streak. For example, the song about Officer Kopke or something, a police officer. These kids were joking or making fun of a policeman. You can tell that he has a very dark streak. However, some people insist that he wrote the music, but he did not. The entire music was written by Leonard Bernstein. And Jerome Robbins is the choreographer. Here's the word choreography. This is to write or to design a dance. They have their special language they use so that all the dancers can read that or print the dance sheet and they know how to dance. So that's called the choreography, and Jerome Robbins is a great choreographer, very energetic. All these are the great things about this sophisticated musical that makes it so great. And some people think the dance and the gang warfare is even more compelling than the love story. That's what they say in the Time magazine. And then it was made into a movie in 1961. And this movie was nominated. Here we have the word nominated. That is teaming, because it is such an honor to be nominated by itself, not necessarily to win, that the nomination itself is a great honor. So we would often say a person was nominated so many times instead of winning, because being nominated means you are one of the 5 greatest of the year. So that's a great honor. So this musical was nominated for 11 Academy Awards and won 10 of them, which is a very, very high percentage. We've seen movies nominated for 10, 11, 12, 13, and only 1 or 2 wins, but this one got 10 wins. As far as the actors are concerned, we have George Chakiris for supporting actor and Rita Moreno for supporting actress, and the best picture. So the song and lyrics and so on may or may not have won. There's one thing about this musical that is worth mentioning, that is Marni Nixon. The movie soundtrack has Marni Nixon, who's a beautiful lady on the right-hand side. She sang the Maria role, played by Natalie Wood in the movie. So it was dubbed. She sang it, and Natalie would pretend to be singing, lip-synced in this movie. As to the boy, who was played by Richard Bamer in this movie, a different singer sang his part. This person is called Jimmy Bryant. He sang the part of Tony, and it won the Grammy Award for Best Soundtrack Album. And this Marni Nixon is someone special, She sang in all these movies in 1942 all the way to 1998 when she was in Mulan, the animated Disney cartoon Mulan. She sang the song, the voice of a grandmother. But the three musical titles that were highlighted in red color, being The King and I, West Side Story, and My Fair Lady. She sang the title role, the leading role in The King and I as Anna and the King, The King and I, 国王与我. And West Side Story, she was Maria. And in My Fair Lady, she sang the part of Audrey Hepburn, Eliza Doolittle. And she sang many, many minor roles as well, not as great as these 3. For example, in 1953, she sang Marilyn Monroe's part in Gentlemen Prefer Blondes. And let's go down. In 1957, she sang Deborah Kerr's role, Terry McKay, in the movie An Affair to Remember, which was translated into 金玉盟, and she played a little part in Mary Poppins as the geese. Of course, she didn't play it. The geese were animated, but she sang the part. And then the Sound of Music, she played Sister Sophia in the convent, and you could actually see her, especially in the opening scene after Julie Andrews went back to the convent. There were a group of nuns singing a chorus, and Marni Nixon was one of them. And the last one was Mulan. I think she died 2 years ago. So she had a wonderful voice, and from the picture we could tell she was very pretty, and she appeared in many movies. However, acting was not her thing. She only played a few minor roles, but her voice is certainly enchanting. Then we have the last one, which is 菩萨蛮. 菩萨蛮 is the title of this. It's a format. It tells you the format of this poem. And it was written by Li Yu, whom we generally speaking, we would call him Li Houzhu, because in his dynasty, which is Nantang, in the 5 dynasties, which is not 宋齐梁陈，5代十国哈，I think he was probably one of the 十国. I couldn't remember anyway. Tang, and he was one of the emperors of his dynasty, which is Nantang, and he's the later one, which is the one that surrendered to Song Chao. So he's called Houzhu, meaning he's the second and the later emperor of this dynasty. And it says by him in his own voice, 花明月暗非轻物，今宵好向郎边去. It's called either 刹袜 or 铲袜，铲袜不相接，不相接，手提金缕鞋. It is, he is describing his own illicit affair with this lady who later became his wife, his queen. But before they got married and she became the official queen, they were having a night of affair in the night. And this lady, who's a young girl, would take off her shoes, which was embroidered or crocheted in a lacy fashion with gold threads. She held this shoes in her hand so that people would not hear her footsteps. So she was wearing only socks, and she climbed the fragrant steps, using the fragrant to describe this elegantly made steps. So this girl was trying to meet her beau, B-E-A-U, that's a boyfriend. She was trying to meet her beau, who is the king of the country, and it was in the evening with the moonlight sort of dark, and the flowers, she could still see flowers in bright colors, and there was a light fog or mist moving on earth. Okay, this was a very beautiful part of this poem, describing the background and this girl. And the next part, which is the second part of the poem, describes how she behaved, how lovely she was in the eyes of her beau. 画堂南半见，一向为人颤，奴为出来难，教君知一帘. This is really marvelous writing. So we met at the south side of this ornate hallway or hall. And the moment she saw me, she came rushing to me, shaking with delight. And she was 依偎在你的旁边, just I don't know how to describe this. When the girl saw the boy, and she came immediately, and okay, so this is very lively. And then this girl spoke right there. She said, "It is so difficult for me to come out because my parents or because of other court servants and so on. And you should really take pity on me. You should love me more." She's telling this king or emperor that pity me for going through the trouble to meet you. Okay, this is a lovely, lovely poem. And we also know that this king eventually surrendered the kingdom to the next dynasty, which is Song, and he became a captive in house arrest for the rest of his life. And he spent the rest of his life writing very, very sad poems that just so moving and so wonderfully written. That part of his works were much more famous than this part, the previous part, when he was a debonair or a womanizer. Okay, so he wrote very light-hearted poems about the weather, the spring and fall, and so on and so forth. But it is those that he wrote after he was captured or after he surrendered that were the best of his works. So he died at age, 41, not a long life. He was born in Nanjing. It was the last emperor of his dynasty. He ascended the throne in the year 961. How we say the throne is the Wang Zuo. So when he get on to sit on the throne, that means he ascended, 就是上到王座里去哈。And even when he was being crowned as the emperor, he deferred to the rule of the Song dynasty. He did not yet surrender, but he proclaimed that Song is his boss, and he would pay tribute every year to keep peace. Then his army lost. They were defeated by Song dynasty, that would be Zhao Kuang-yin as the new emperor in the year 975. So he was captured and moved to Dongjing. He was in Nanjing. I don't know. Dongjing 是哪里？Song capital is Kaifeng or the Bianjing. So yeah, I guess that's the capital. Kaifeng is the capital of Song dynasty. Beisong at least. And he died a few years later, 3 years later. He was captured and in prison or under house arrest. He still has some court servants and so on and so forth, but much reduced and very sad. He's a pure artist at heart. He writes good calligraphy, and he could paint, and he knows music, and he was most noted for his good poetry. Poems he wrote, just about everyone knows a few of them, like 春花秋月何时了，往事知多少，小楼昨夜又东风，故国不堪回首月明中。雕栏玉砌应犹在，只是朱颜改。问君能有几多愁？恰似一江春水向东流。That's one of his most famous poems. Okay. The background of this poem is because he was having an affair with this girl who was later to become his queen. How come he didn't have this girl as his queen earlier? Because he had a different queen who was Da Zhouhou. Da Zhouhou is the elder sister of Xiao Zhouhou. So they're sisters. So the father had 2 daughters, the older one and the younger one, and the older one was crowned as queen or empress of the king or emperor. I keep switching using these words because a Chinese ruler would be considered an emperor, and the queen would be considered an empress. However, during this time when there were 5 or 10 different kingdoms, I don't know if each and everyone consider themselves as an empire. So I imagine they could be considered as king and queen. So Li Yu married the older sister, and the father named the two sisters Huang and Nü Ying, just like Yao. Yao, the almost the oldest king of China was Yao, and he had two daughters, Huang and Nü Ying, and they both married the second king, the king after him, which is Shun, who is Shun. So this father somehow named his two daughters Huang and Nü Ying, and Huang got married to the king Li Yu and became the queen. So she is usually called Da Zhou Hou, and her younger sister Xiao Zhou Hou later became the queen after Da Zhou Hou died. So you had Xiao Zhou Hou, who became the queen, but she was not the original queen. When Li Yu was 18 years old, she married the elder sister, and the elder sister later became ill. And one day she saw her younger sister in the palace, and she was shocked. She said, "How come you're here?" And this younger sister, being young and innocent, she did not know that she should defer to the older sister. She should hide the fact that she was having an affair with the elder sister's husband. So the queen was very, very angry when she answered, "Oh, I've been here a couple of days." So the queen never turned around to face her younger sister until the day she died. And the loving couple who are now free to marry, they did not do so until 3 years later. We have to defer to the laws or the custom. We cannot just get married as soon as your spouse died. So after 3 years, this younger sister became the queen. But during the 3 years, she came here all the time. They were having an affair, but just as that described in the previous poem, they were doing it illicitly, secretly, but most people knew that it was happening. But that's before she got married to the king. Okay. Then we talk about this Pusaman. There's certain format. One of the oldest Pusaman was written by Li Bai. Li Bai, he was in the Tang Dynasty. While Song, we usually say Song is popular in Song Dynasty, which came afterwards. So Li Bai was the first person who ever wrote a 词 in the form 词 in using the title Pusaman, which is a song. The format came from Tang Dynasty court musicians. This would have exactly the same number of words and the 平仄 and that's the tone of each word and where it rhymes, and so how many words in the first part and how many in the second part, and so on and so forth. That is the pattern, the format of the 词牌 called the 菩萨蛮。平林脉脉烟如织，寒山一带伤心碧。明色入高楼，有人楼上愁。欲接空伫立，宿鸟归飞急。何处是归程？长亭连短亭。This is also very popular, and it was many people consider it was the first 词 ever in China, but it's hard to say because many Tang poems have different lengths of lines. Like this one, it has 7755, and the second part is 5555. That is the format of Pusaman. Okay, that's the end of today. Okay, that's pretty late too. Anybody has anything to say? Know that you can say anything you want to say during the class. I would prefer it that way. Okay.